Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 458 of the Health Detective Podcast. And a lot of exciting stuff going on. We just got back from the HICS conference in San Diego, California. If you are on live right now and you happen to have been there with us, please let me know in the chat who is on live with us and if you were there. It was very cool the first year that they did this in 2024. I have no idea how to explain this, but there was just something special about it, extra special about it in 2025 this year. And I was talking to other staff members. We couldn't put our finger on it exactly, but we just left feeling so filled emotionally and spiritually, definitely drained mentally and physically, but we can fix that part with some good sleep and some good food. The emotional and spiritual side just being filled like that, that's not something you get every single day. So absolutely amazing experience. And one great thing that they did this year that was not the case last year is they already confirmed that there will be a HICS 2026 in San Diego, California, October 8th through the 10th. So we don't have any link for you guys right now. I'm just saying this is a year in advance, basically, or a little less than a year, maybe 355 days. We could not give you any more of a heads up. We would love to see you guys there. I got to keep shouting her out for this too. A huge shout out to T, who flew all the way from Australia, Melbourne, to get to San Diego. She had never been in the United States of America before. She's in her early 40s, never been here. And she came all the way for the HICS conference. She already bought a ticket for next year. They were sold at the conference. She already bought a ticket for next year to be able to join us in 2026. I want to see you guys there. We had a great time. Over 85 FDNs were at Reed's house. And well over 95, 100 FDNs were in attendance at the conference. So I want to turn that into 150 next year. I'd love to see you guys there. And our guest today actually is from a similar part of the world. So we'll get to talk to her in just a second. Before that, I want to shout out one thing that we have coming up next week. That is our third ever Holistic Health Week. And so we kind of changed the structure of Holistic Health Week every time. The first time we did it, it was pre-recorded, every different topic you can imagine. Then we played it live. Second time, it was fully live, 30 sessions. That was outrageous, but very fun. And we broke a record sales month for FDN, so that was all really exciting. We got to give away a bunch of free information and still have record sales. Pretty good gig. This time around, what we're doing is we have about 14 or 15 case studies for you guys. So a little bit different and possibly in a very good way, depending on what you're looking for. So all of these sessions in this Holistic Health Week coming up October 20th through the 23rd are all cases done by FDNs. So you will get to see the case history of the individual that we're working with. You'll get to see their lab results live, I should say. We're going to read those, and then we're going to go over the protocols and the results that these clients were able to get working with our FDNs. So we have everything from autoimmune cases, breast implant illness, skin issues, gut issues, weight loss resistance, a lot of cool stuff there. And the best part is the event is free. So if you go to FDN, I got to check my link here to make sure I'm not saying it wrong. If you go to fdntraining.com/HHW25HDP, we can get you a free ticket. That's fdntraining.com/HHW25HDP. We'll see you there. All right, time for my guest now. She's got an amazing bio. I always believe in reading my guests' full bios because it's really cool if they've taken the time to do some amazing things in life. So we're going to read that, and then we will get to talk to her. So Lisa Tamati is a globally recognized expert in longevity and health optimization, a trailblazing educator, and a serial entrepreneur. As a former ultra-endurance athlete with over 25 years of experience competing in some of the world's toughest races, Lisa has transformed her passion for peak performance and resilience into a mission to empower others to achieve their full potential in health and longevity. A podcaster for over a decade now, Lisa hosts a globally top 200 ranked show in the functional medicine, longevity, and biohacking space, where she interviews world-renowned experts and explores cutting-edge advancements in health. She is also the author of 5 best-selling books, including Relentless, which shares her inspirational journey of overcoming adversity and achieving the seemingly impossible. Lisa's career extends beyond broadcasting and writing, though. She is the co-founder of the biotech company Avum Labs, dedicated to developing innovative solutions for aging and immune health. She has also founded several other successful ventures, leveraging her expertise to bridge the gap between scientific research and practical applications in wellness. In addition to her entrepreneurial achievements, Lisa is a sought-after speaker, documentary filmmaker, and former television host, known for her engaging storytelling and ability to simplify complex scientific topics for diverse audiences. Her columns and content focus on empowering individuals to take control of their health through evidence-based strategies, mindset shifts, and practical tools. Lisa's work embodies a unique blend of personal grit, scientific expertise, and unwavering passion. Whether she's addressing professionals in the biotech industry, coaching athletes, or inspiring everyday individuals, Lisa brings unparalleled energy and insight to every stage. You can learn more about her work at lisatamati.com. And I have to admit, I am proud of myself for getting through that without stuttering. This was a tough one today, and we nailed it. So Lisa, thank you for tuning in with us all the way from the other end of the world. She's tuning in from New Zealand. We're glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's a long way. We're at the other side of the world. We're in the future. So back to the future.
Awesome. What time is it there? Early in the morning, I'm guessing?
Early in the morning. Yep. And we're just coming into spring, and you guys are heading into autumn, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. I always find that cool. I've never been to the Southern Hemisphere, and it's not something I think about often, but it is kind of insane that, two sides of the world are dealing with completely different seasons at any given time. I might have to start escaping to Australia and New Zealand in the winter. That would be a good idea. So I want to spend as much time with you today as possible. Obviously, you have an incredibly impressive story. And there's 2 parts I want to address here, because I know that you have a very personal health story with a family member of yours. And normally we start with people's health issues, but even prior to that, if it's okay, I'd actually like to start with you personally and talk about how the heck you got into this ultra endurance thing. I mean, I know most people will maybe run a race in their life. Maybe they'll run a few miles or kilometers, but most people do not do that. So how the heck did you get into something like that?
Yeah, so thanks, Evan. I spent over 25 years racing the world's sort of toughest endurance events. So I clocked up over 70,000 kilometers, which is sort of like the equivalent of running 2.5 times around the planet. And I managed to I mostly did deserts. I raced across deserts, a lot in the Sahara. I did the Libyan desert, Niger, Jordan, the Arabian desert, the Gobi Desert in China, Death Valley in the USA. I ran a famous race over there called Badwater a couple of times. I ran through the length of New Zealand at one point for charity, doing 2,250 kilometers in 42 days. Sorry, can't give you the miles, but a bloody long way. The outback of Australia, the Indian Himalayas, the Nepalese Himalayas, all over the planet, doing these extreme adventure races, like, running for multiple days often. So ultra marathons, for those who don't know, is anything basically over the marathon distance, which is like 26.1 miles or 42 Ks. And so anything over 50 kilometers is considered an ultra. But most of the races that I was doing were, between 100K and 200 and 250 and that type of thing. And some of them were non-stop races, and some of them are multi-day stage races where you get to sleep overnight. But most of them were, non-stop. The clock's ticking, and you've got to get through in a certain period of time. And the funny thing, even, is I absolutely no talent to do what I did. I was a severe asthmatic as a child, so I was in and out of hospital, on all of the steroids and all of that sort of stuff as a kid, really badly. Hell of a lot of antibiotics in my childhood, all of that type of thing. So I had a very poor VO2 max. And so for anyone who's an athlete listening, that know that, if you want to be an endurance athlete, you need a good VO2 max, a good set of lungs. You need to be able to pump in enough oxygen and get it going. I was, way below the average person. So what I found, though, is that I could go long. I could go for a long time. So I had a really good endurance sort of genetics for doing long distance sort of stuff. Well, not that it was suitable for my genetics, but I was able to do it, right? Put it that way. And so I didn't have the speed to be a fast athlete, but I could go for a long time. And most of that is really mental, right? I could just hang in there, fight through the pain, keep pushing when your body's absolutely, I was just very bloody minded. And so, I ended up being quite good at it, but not through talent, but through sheer, experience and just pushing the limits. And I had massive failures as well as successes, as you do, when you're pushing the limits of endurance, and, some catastrophic failures as well. But the thing that I took away from it mostly, because running is, just running, but it's the mindset shift that it created in me, the ability to overcome obstacles, to grind through stuff, to never let the limitations of other people that they put on you or tell you that, oh, you're not suitable for endurance at running, And I remember a scientist saying to me, if you're a young person coming to see whether you should be doing this, we'd be telling you not to give up your day job. And I'm like, lucky nobody told me that, because I got to number 10 in the world at one point. So it's not about talent so much as about your mindset to things. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. I did do a lot of damage to my body, to be honest, pushing the limits that hard. And we can sort of dig into that a little bit later too, about doing things that are right for your genetics and what high performance actually takes out of your body when you're pushing the limits, at this extreme level. When you're doing back to back, I mean, like running through New Zealand, for example, doing sort of 70 kilometers a day, which is, what is that? It's almost 2 marathons, a day, for 40 something days. You really smash the crap out of your body, and the inflammatory response in the body and the hormonal shifts and the cortisol and the adrenal. You can imagine the excuse the word, but the shit show that my body was after doing things like that. And so I was always really interested after that, later on in life, about how do I maintain my health and my performance. And then, we can get into probably the major story of today, which is when my mum had a major medical event, and go from there.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time to explain your journey, though, because I mean, it is incredibly impressive. I don't know the miles to kilometers ratio offhand, but I can think about like my car, right? My car has both settings in there, and I'm like trying to do it roughly. And then when you said 500 kilometers in 40 days, I'm like, I don't know what that is. I know it's a lot. I think that's more than I've ever ran cumulatively in my life in 40 days. So, and you know what? I like that you brought up this point, though. There's two things. So one is the mindset side, because when people hear this stuff, I think actually the proof that it's a lot of mindset is when people hear this stuff, they just assume, oh, I could never do that, right? So how many people will just never even attempt a marathon, let alone an ultra, endurance type of event? So that's a mindset thing, though, right? You're not even trying. That already eliminated 99% of the population. So that's really interesting. I never thought about it as being more mindset than physical. I'm sure there is, of course, rigorous training that goes in. But I have found that to be true with almost any cardiovascular event that, like if I'm bench pressing, for example, I can will my way to a few more reps, but I'm not willing my way to double the amount of reps that I normally would. Whereas when I was into running a little bit more before I broke my foot several years back, I found that I could push the limits some days way more than I thought. And it was mostly around like how good I felt mentally that day. So it's really cool what the body's capable of. Now, I'd love to also talk about, though, as well, what you said with what this did to your body, because I don't want to scare anyone out there from doing what they love, but there is actually very clear data that even marathon runners, so forget the ultra endurance athletes, marathon runners actually have a shorter life expectancy than the average person. And that's saying something, because in America, we got crazy food, a lot of stuff going on. So the fact that someone that's supposedly doing something healthy is actually worse off than that average individual, that's a little sad. I don't know, actually. I shouldn't say I don't think. I don't know if we have the data yet to show what will happen with ultra endurance athletes, but it does sound like for you, as you've already mentioned, there was some, kind of health consequences, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, this is not just your average doing a marathon. This is extreme stuff and extreme temperatures and extreme altitudes and things. So you've got a whole lot of other things. And I think overall, like, runners are healthier. But what we need to be thinking about is that fitness is not just cardiovascular, and that where I think runners often go wrong is that they train in their 40s and 50s and 60s how they were when they were 20. And when you're 20, you have a different hormonal setup, right? You are able to, push harder, go faster, all of that type of thing. And you're able to put in more miles without sort of the downside. Now, when you're a little bit older, you've got to be thinking about catabolic versus anabolic. Like, are you breaking down muscle when you run these long distances? And that's one of the major things. That's why you see a lot of older runners, they're cardiovascularly fit, right? Their heart's pretty in good shape, right? Maybe. But they're sarcopenic. Often they've got, they're losing muscle mass. And muscle is the currency of longevity. Like, if you don't have good muscle mass, then you are heading towards problems. So this is really problematic as we get older to focus solely. So each decade, I would say, you need to change the way you train, and you need to incorporate more of the muscle building, the anabolic stuff as you get older, in order to counteract that natural muscle loss that happens. And runners, because they're doing a catabolic activity that tears the muscles down, and basically you're losing muscle. I mean, I've had rhabdomyolysis, which is where you're breaking down so much muscle mass during races that it clogs up the kidneys, basically, and you end up with kidney dysfunction or kidney disease if you're really bad. And so I did a lot of damage to the kidneys because of that, right? Because repeatedly doing that. I think to say that marathon running is unhealthy is probably unfair as well. Like, you need to think of it in terms of recovery and the right time in between your racing. So where I went wrong as a young athlete, not knowing anything, and of course, you don't know any of this when you're young or younger, you are pushing back-to-back races, because I was just so passionate and loved it, and I loved the adventure, that I was not setting aside times and seasons of my year to recover from the massive stresses that I was putting myself under. And I was just looking for the next hit, because it's a very addictive sport, right, by the way. You say when you get across the finish line, and I've just been at an ultra marathon on the weekend with my husband, who's still doing them, and he's like, never again, I'm never doing this again. This was so painful, this was so tough. And then last night in bed, he's like, oh, there's a race down in Wellington. And like, it's just like this addictive dopamine sort of thing. It's like childbirth. You sort of forget the pain once you've gone through it. So it's sort of like a masochistic sort of way to push your limits, and you sort of always want to go more and harder. But where I went wrong was doing back-to-back and not having time in between for my body to recover. So like something like Badwater, which is a famous race in the States, and sort of like the unofficial world champs of ultramarathoning. It's a very, prestigious race in our world, if you like, our world of nutters. It's 135 miles. You've got temperatures up to 57 degrees. You've got you're starting below sea level, and you're going over two massive mountain passes, and then you're finishing on Mount Whitney, halfway up Mount Whitney. So you've got a massive amount of climbing to do in this heat, in this 135 miles. So to recover from something like that, and that, those took me around the 38-hour mark, 37 hours, 38 hours. I did it twice. That takes 6 months to get back to health on a cellular level. And that's if you're recovering properly and not going out and doing the next race the following week, right? And that's where I think a lot of people go wrong. They don't build in that recovery time, that time to rebuild the muscles and do their Pilates, their yoga. It's a balanced approach to doing your training. So now my training looks completely different. This actually brings me to a point even about genetics. I do a lot of genetics in my practice. And when I did my own genetics, and I only got into genetics in my late 40s, doing the training, I did my genetics, and then I realized that I was so unsuited to the type of sport that I was doing. Okay, I was good at it because I had the mindset, but my body was not suited from a genetic perspective, right? So that meant that I have, for example, a gene called the 9p21 gene that is a 6G variant. Now, what that means is that I have I get really inflamed in the blood vessels very quickly, which leads to, in my family, we have a lot of aneurysms and strokes. That one fact alone, when I understood the consequences of that one gene, which was a really, quite a rare and bad variant, that was the end of my career, right then and there. Because I knew that if I carried on the way that I was doing, I was likely to die of a stroke or an aneurysm very because my blood vessels can't take that inflammatory response. And of course, when you're doing extreme exercise, that's extremely inflammatory, just like having a massive amount of alcohol would be, or doing drugs or eating bad food, are all inflammatory causing things. So to exercise at this level was massively inflammatory. So that was the end of my career right then and there for my own health. And then I also discovered things like hormonal, issues and other things that led to me being not able to have children and so on and so forth, right? From a genetic perspective also, I'll give you another example of how powerful doing your own genes is, because you can really then tailor your exercise, your sport, your lifestyle, your sleep, your diet, your hormone profile, everything to your genetic makeup. I'll give you another example with my husband. Now, he is suited to doing longer distance aerobic activity. That's really good for him because he's got the ApoE4 gene. He's a 3/4 variant. Now, that one is a very bad one for cardiovascular and for Alzheimer's and developing those types of problems. So for him to be doing longer distance and regulating his metabolism and his blood sugar regulation is actually a really good thing. Another thing that we found out with him, though, that I used to make him get up at 5 a.m. and do a CrossFit workout. Now, that was a disastrous time for his genetics to be doing that at that time of the day, and it was the wrong type of exercise. His body needs longer to build up its ATP in between sets, so the CrossFit style training is wrong. And what happened to him is his cortisol levels went way too high. He started to put on weight around the middle for his diligence of getting up at 5 a.m. and doing CrossFit, because that was the wrong time of the day. 5 a.m. in the morning is a time when most of the testosterone for men is being produced around that time. So if you get up and you smash your testosterone levels and don't let them, rise, then that can be problematic. And then an early morning stress for his genetic type was really another bad thing, and that caused that cortisol response. That is, cortisol went up too high, and that caused the weight gain around the middle. So you can start to see how powerful it is to understand your own genetics. In the case of my mum, she was getting into her story. She had a massive aneurysm a decade ago. She was very overweight. She was always looking after the family, not looking after her own health, typical lovely mum who was too busy looking after the kids and not looking after herself so well. The wrong diet, the wrong exercise for her genetics. And just to talk about her genetics, after I'd studied genetics, I was able to tailor her diet and her exercise and things to her. And I'll get into her other part of her story in a second. But that meant that over time, she lost 54 kilos, like a whole person. She was 100 kilos, and now she's, just the perfect weight. So, and that was because she was eating at the wrong times of the day, the wrong types of food for her genetics. And once we dialed that in, plus a stricter regime and the right types of food, she lost all that weight over a period of time. So this is where, like people that are struggling with weight loss, they may be doing inadvertently, they may be disciplined, they may be doing the diet but they're following the wrong diet, or they're doing the wrong type of exercise, or they're doing it at the wrong time of the day. All of these things have a massive impact on how you end up showing up, in the world.
Absolutely. I want to, thanks for transitioning kind of into the story of your mom, because that's where I wanted to go next. The second too, because the audience doesn't know this yet, but of course I got to read your notes before we got on. And the second that you said that you had the genetics for the aneurysm side, I'm like, oh my goodness, because I knew that was part of your mom's story. When you got the genetics done, had she already been through that? Or Okay. So was that like this light bulb moment for you when you're like, oh my gosh, we have these genetics in my family, and my mom actually had this?
Yeah, and my granddad and and on the other side of my family as well, my father died of an aneurysm too, in the stomach. And the brain's a different part. So it was like, this is a wake up call, and at this point, I was 48 when I started studying genetics. And so that was like a time after having done 25 years of craziness to go, okay, sporting ambitions aside, I've done what I needed to do in that space. I've got nothing more to prove, really. This is time to look into longevity. And of course, I was in in the longevity space already because of what had happened to my mum. So backing into that story a little bit. So she had a massive aneurysm. She collapsed on the floor at home. She was taken in the ambulance to the hospital. The doctors, the ambulance driver thought she was having a neurological event, a stroke or an aneurysm. And he said to the doctor at the ED, I think that's what's happening. He decided to ignore it, the doctor, and thought she was having a migraine, which was, so a medical misadventure from the get-go, right? So we were left there waiting for 6 hours and them doing nothing but giving her painkillers. And my mum was in extreme pain, and I knew she was not the type of person to complain. She was an absolute massive, like apparently when you have a bleed in the brain, it's the most painful thing you can possibly imagine because your brain is swelling into the skull that's a fixed size, right? I actually at that point rang up a friend who was a paramedic who had crewed for me in Death Valley and other places, and I said, hey, the people up here, I'm not getting any, I didn't know what to ask for. I didn't have a medical background at that point. I don't know what to do, like my mum's in trouble. So she raced up and she took one look at her and knew immediately that it was a neurological thing. So she went to the doctor and said, get her a CT scan now. And she knew him. So he listened to her finally. So after 6 hours, she was taken through for a scan. And of course, it came back with blood right throughout the brain, massive aneurysm. And they didn't think she was going to survive. And then we live in a little rural town. And so we didn't have a hospital with all the facilities that was needed. So we had to wait another 12 hours before the air ambulance was able to come and get her and take her through to our main hospital down in Wellington to, go into the operating room to put in a stent to start draining the blood. And so we didn't know if she would survive, like she could have died at any moment. And they were talking like very likely that she wasn't going to make it. Usually with aneurysms, you don't make it. And the surgeons down in Wellington did an absolutely amazing job, and they managed to put in a stent, stop the bleed, start to get the blood off the brain. But they said to us, look, we won't know if she's out of danger for weeks. She's going to be in and out of coma. She's going to have what happens when you have an aneurysm or a bleed in the brain or a concussion for that matter, or any sort of TBI. Your brain at the beginning had the initial event, right? But then it starts to spread over the coming weeks and days. After that, the immune activation starts, right? And your body starts to ramp up its inflammatory cascade. And that's where the damage starts to spread. So initially, she was still able to talk to us, but then we lost more and more and more of her. And she eventually fell into a coma, and then she was in and out of coma for weeks. And it was touch and go whether she would come through. And in this time, because of that medical misadventure, that was another wake-up call for me, that I suddenly realized that they are not God, and you have to take responsibility as best you can to keep an eye on what they are doing, to understand what's going on. So from that point on, I promised God and the universe that if you just give me one more chance, I will study, I will do whatever it takes to get my mum back. Just please don't take her, those bargains that you make when you're in dire straits. And so I made good on that promise. I started to study and I haven't stopped studying, and now we're a decade later. And what I first initially, because she was in the ICU, I couldn't really control very much, but I did pick up some things that the doctors didn't pick up and already, and that sort of carried on. Then when she finally came out of that critical phase, and they said, look, she's going to survive, but she's got massive brain damage. She's like a baby with no higher function. She's, not much over a vegetative state. There's a little bit there, but hardly anything. She couldn't talk. She was paralyzed on the right side. She didn't know who she was or what she was. She had sort of no, higher consciousness, if you like. And they said to her, look, she's 74. Your brain can't heal from this. There's no coming back. We'll take her back through to New Plymouth. We'll start a rehabilitation program, but, don't expect anything. And you're probably going to have to put into an institution, and, that'll be it. And I was just like, that's not happening on my watch, she's alive and we're going to fight, And the first thing that I picked up when we got her back home to New Plymouth and to the hospital here, they took the oxygen off her that she had been on. She was on supplemental oxygen. As soon as they took the oxygen off, she started to deteriorate even further. And I'm arguing with them, I want the oxygen put back on. And then I started to think, now I had done a lot of racing at altitude in the Himalayas, at extreme altitude. So I knew what altitude sickness looked like, and I had altitude sickness, and I was seeing altitude sickness in my mum. I was seeing a lack of oxygen. I was seeing a proliferation of bacteria in her mouth and other places, and I was just really convinced that oxygen was not getting to. And what happens when you have such a massive brain injury is that part of the brain can be affected, that you're not breathing properly, and you have, sleep apnea and things like that. So I said to them, I want supplemental oxygen and I want a sleep apnea assessment. And they said, nah, you can't have either of those, and we're not doing a sleep apnea assessment. Why should we do it? So I happened to have a friend who was a sleep physiologist, and I, conned him into coming into the hospital one night, and we smuggled him in and we did the sleep apnea assessment. Bugger their rules. I'm doing what I need to do to save my money. And we hooked her up to the machine, and he did a sleep apnea assessment, and it came back severe sleep apnea. So she was stopping breathing hundreds of times at night. She was actually chain stoke breathing, which is what you do on the way out, right? So she was at very, the little bit of brain function that she had was being knocked off every night, and she was sleeping 18 hours a day, like that, because she was so fatigued, of course. So not sleeping was a massive find, and to find that she was not breathing. So then we were able, I said, here's the results, doctors. And they were like, okay, we'll put the sleep apnea machine on her. So we got the sleep apnea machine on her. And then we started to see little bits of improvement, but not, massive. But then I was like, what else can oxygen do? And I came across a doctor in America called Paul Harch, who is an expert in hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And I read his book, The Oxygen Revolution, and I read all these cases of extreme people, like with, extreme brain damage, coming back to being nearly normal. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I need, right? I need hyperbaric oxygen. And then I live in a little rural town, and I'm like, well, how do I get it? Hyperbaric, there's no clinic here. What I found was a commercial dive company that had one of these things, because they need it for the divers who get the bends, right? That's where hyperbaric oxygen therapy actually originates from, the dive industry. And they use it when the divers get the bends and they come up too quickly. But what we found is that hyperbaric, when you go the other way, you put people under pressure, you put oxygen, supplemental oxygen, a high concentration of oxygen into them, and you get to hyper-oxygenate the body, because when you're under pressure, the oxygen molecules are compressed down in size, and then they can dissolve into the plasma of the blood, and they can get through things like the blood-brain barrier and get a massive amount of oxygen to that starving brain, that brain that's damaged, that's inflamed, that hasn't got good oxygen flow, that hasn't got good nutrient flow, good blood flow. It can get it across the blood-brain barrier and start to heal the brain, right? And so I begged these people, can I please use your hyperbaric chamber? Here's my situation, here's my research. And these amazing people said, yes, you sign a legal waiver so that they were not responsible medically. And when you get her out of hospital, you can bring her down. So then I had a fight on my hands, because she was in the hospital for months. And the hospital wanted to put her into an institution, because then she was in somebody else's budget. So when you're in the hospital system, you need to understand you're fighting for resources. And when you're a 74-year-old, you're not at the top of the list of priorities, right? Because you've had your life, you've had a good innings, all of these types of words that they throw at you, right? And so you're fighting for the resources. Now, I was fighting for the resources to take her home and to have some support come into the home and help us for an hour or two a day, and to, but then you're still under the hospital budget, at least in New Zealand, that's how it works. And they didn't want that. So I had this massive battle with the social worker to try to get the resources to bring her home. And he didn't want to do that. So I took my big brother with me to all meetings, and he looks like the Rock. So I got what I needed at the end of the day. As you can see, I don't when it comes to my family, I do whatever it takes to make it work.
I got you.
Yeah. And so I managed to get the resources. We took her home, because my thinking was, if I have her at home, I can care for her better. Now, she was 24/7 around the clock care for 2 people. So that's massive. And the social worker said to me, you are never going to cope with her. There is no way that your family is ever going to cope. And I came in and I threw my 2 books. I have, two running books of my adventures, all around the planet, and go, this is who I is, man. I'm not giving up on my mum, and you better support us in this. So I got her home. I took her straight, before I even took her home that day, I took her straight down to this factory, commercial dive factory, and we stuck her on a forklift because she was paralyzed. and put her into this big, what looks like an LPG cylinder, like a big tank. And we got her in there. It was really difficult to do, but we did it. And we went there every day. We did 33 sessions, day after day after day. And she started to respond. She started to she didn't get up and walk, like she was still paralyzed, but she started to move her right arm, which had been fully paralyzed. She started to have a couple of words. She started to have a flicker of intelligence behind her eyes. And she was trying to move, she was trying to do things. And I was like, this is working, and this was already 33 treatments in. And then the people at the dive centre said, unfortunately, we have to take the chamber off on a contract, so we're going to lose access. So I was devastated. I'm like, oh my God, because we need a lot more than 33 treatments for this massive brain injury. And so I researched about buying a hyperbaric chamber. So I mortgaged my house. I bought a hyperbaric chamber, what's called a mild hyperbaric chamber, and I installed it into my house. And then this is a much smaller unit, right? And I had to work out how to get my paralyzed mum into this, what looks like a pup tent, and which was also really difficult, but I found a way. And my family and I, we persevered day in, day out. And then I started to study everything that I needed to stay one step ahead of her rehabilitation. So I studied functional neurology, diet, genetics, the ketones and things, which are a really powerful piece. But functional neurology was really important because her whole vestibular system was off. Like she was like a rag doll. She didn't know where she was in space. And that was our biggest challenge. Mm-hmm. So I had to stay one step ahead of her as she started to get more and more function back from doing the hyperbaric, taking the right supplements, having the right food every day, spoon fed. Like she couldn't even put a spoon to her mouth. She didn't know where her mouth was, so I had to do all of that and thousands of hours of retraining her. So I developed like an 8-hour schedule every day where we were doing different things, facets of her training. For a start, she couldn't move, so I moved her body. I kept her joints moving. I kept her feet moving. I had a machine that would help her stand up and be rigid, so it locked her in so that her body started to get what being upright was about, so it taught her vestibular system what is upright. And so on and so forth. Anyway, cut a long story short, it took me just over a year to get her out of the wheelchair and walking in between parallel bars, and then another year, and she was able to walk fully, going to the gym 5 days a week, got her full driver's license back, full power of attorney, full intellectual capacity back. And I remember going into the doctor's surgery. This was like 2 and a bit years after the initial event. And we wanted to get her driver's license, right? And she really wanted her independence back, because they'd taken her driver's license off her, obviously. And so I take her into the waiting room of this doctor who'd been there at the beginning of her journey, and he comes out expecting to see her in a wheelchair and things. Mum gets up and walks in and says, "Hey, I'm here to get my driver's license." And he burst into tears, and he was just like, "This is impossible. This can't be happening. This is not possible." And he did all the testing, all the eye testing. Her peripheral vision had been gone, and then it had come back, from doing the hyperbaric and so on. And it was amazing. And anyway, she was allowed to go for her license, got her license. That was a big celebration day. Got her independence back. Incredible journey. And so I wrote a book about that, and that one was called Relentless. That's my mum there on the cover for those watching. And it was to empower and inspire other people not to give up. When the doctors will tell you that it's all over, it's not true. It's not necessarily true. They may be wrong. They're human too, and a lot of the doctors are in a paradigm of thinking, a certain way of thinking. They don't think like FDN is, right? They don't think like Reed thinks, like I think, that this holistic approach, that doing all this functional medicine might be useful, like all of these things that you and I just take for granted, that's not part of the mainstream thought. And so when they tell you it's all over, it may not be right. It may not be at all. Unfortunately, her journey doesn't end there. 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago, she had another event. It looked like she'd had another stroke. I raced her into the hospital. They refused to do MRIs, but I fought for 3 weeks to get one. And what turned out was she had a CNS lymphoma, so a brain cancer. And And then, so she had tumors, right throughout one side of the brain. And so I chased her neurosurgeon that had done this amazing job previously and all around the place until I got him on the phone. And I said, hey, do you remember my mum? And he said, yes, she's incredible. And I said, well, she needs your help again. She's got brain cancer, or she's got a brain tumor at that point. We didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. Can you operate? And so he said, yep, get it down here on Tuesday. We'll operate. They did that. He took out a grapefruit-sized piece of her brain, this tumor, and it came back from the pathology. It was an aggressive CNS lymphoma. And they said to us, look, there is nothing you can do, and she is too old. She will never, survive the transplants and all of that type of thing, the chemos that we would use for a younger person. There's nothing you can do, and she's got weeks to live. This is very aggressive cancer. And so I went back to my network of people and I started to yell out for help. And I came across some incredible doctors in the metabolic approach to cancer side of the equation. And I started to study, and I put 15 doctors on her team. I was the CEO of her team, so to speak, coordinating all of these approaches and doctors and therapies and ideas on how we could attack this. And we had to go hard. So I went actually on both sides. Usually I try to take the natural approach wherever possible, but because we had weeks to live and nothing, I went advanced.
I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, advanced genetic testing, and it told me what chemo to ask for, what it would be sensitive to. There's advanced genetic testing that you can get done in Greece that they will tell you what supplements your cancer will respond to, like genetically, what chemos, what immunotherapies, all of those things. So I went after it all. I went and got everything that I could possibly get. Now I had to go private because, they weren't going to give us that type of chemo because it wasn't used for this type of cancer. So I had to fight to get that. Eventually got that. We paid for that. Then I did everything from peptides to high levels of ketones to really strict keto diet, because you want to cut off the food supply to the cancer. That's the biggest thing. So there's a book out called How to Starve Cancer by Jane McClellan. If anybody is, facing cancer, good place to start. She's got a course on how to block the different pathways that feed cancers, depending on your cancer. So I did the course. I worked out protocols. And she was on over 150 pills a day, supplements, and really high levels of things, like ridiculous protocol. But it took us 12 weeks to get rid of the tumors on the MRI. So we did another MRI 12 weeks later. They were all gone. And we've just had an MRI done last week, and I was shaking in my boots, because you never want to say you cured a cancer. She's in remission. But last week we did an MRI, and it came back clear, fully clear. 4 years later. 4 years.
Well, she's got to be 84 now, right? If I'm understanding correctly, holy cow.
84. And in between, she's broken her hip, had sepsis, had gastrointestinal bleeding, repeated UTIs, COVID, all of these things. And every single time, even they told me she was not coming back from this, not from the sepsis, not from the hip fracture, not from any of these things. And every time they've been wrong, every time. And she has some disabilities now, like she has balance issues. And when she's walking, she has to be supervised and things like that. But she still has a good quality of life. She's still here for her grandchildren. She's still enjoying going out with her girlfriends and going to the gym every day and, doing all these things. So, yeah, that's my story with my mom.
I just wanted you to know, so because I'm in the same boat here as our audience. So we had two people say the exact same thing as I'm thinking it. And it's just the word, wow. And then this person also said, wow. Well, because no, seriously, you heard earlier, I've done 458 episodes of this podcast. Not all of them are interviews, but Lisa, I would say at least 350 of them are interviews with people with health stories. That, especially that initial healing for your mom, that is one of the craziest, in a good way, cool stories of healing I've probably ever heard on this show. And I don't say that lightly. We've had some amazing stories on, but to know where she was at, it's not even just where she was at, to be at that place at that age. And the body's not working in your favor at that point, regardless of how healthy you are. The body is obviously getting older. It's not getting younger. So to have that transformative healing is just insane. I wanted to ask you, so when she was dealing with the initial implications of the aneurysm, and like you said, it's not like there's a lot of high-level intellectual function going on. does she remember getting better? Does she understand? Or like, is it just like one point where she kind of snaps back to it?
Yeah. She has no memory of about 2 years of her life missing. 2 years or so, you know, like, of like maybe a year and a half of complete missing. And then, you know, like it's all vague, you know, as she started to come back. And she actually doesn't know what she's been through. Like, she doesn't comprehend the miracle that she is. And you know, like, she's got some disabilities now, but she's sitting next to me in the room next to me on her exercise cycle, waiting for me to shut up and take her for coffee, you know. And then we're off to the gym, and, you know, she'll be going out with her girlfriend this afternoon, and, you know, like, she is a miracle, but it's not a miracle in the sense of just magically happened miracle. This is the work of top doctors, you know, like Reed, like, you know, these people that are getting this message out there that we can heal even in the worst possible scenarios where there is no hope. And now I work with people with cancer, and I work with people with dementia, and I work with people with strokes and aneurysms and things like that, concussions, you know, brain rehabilitation, do a lot of work around that space. And I run a hyperbaric clinic and genetics and, you know, all of this sort of stuff. And I see amazing things, but the biggest factor even is your mindset. I have a mindset that that's my superpower, if you like. I never quit. And where I learn that from ultra marathon running, because I learned to grind and do the work, not look for the results. Most people are programmed to go, I go to the gym this week, I lose weight next week, and I'm looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger the week after. That's not how biology works. You have to grind at it for months, weeks, years even, and you have to keep it up. Like, Mum is 84, and I treat her like an Olympic athlete. So a lot of people see the way I train my mum, and they think I'm terrible. They think I'm a horrible daughter. You know, I don't, you know, she has trouble getting up out of a chair. I don't help her unless she's really tired and, you know, ready to go to bed, and I, you know, get her into bed. But most of the time I'm like, get up, come forward, do this, get your bum up, stand up. Like, I'm a sergeant major, right? I'm a freaking SAS bloody sergeant major, but I have to be, and that is tough love, right? That is if I don't push her to, and she wants to live, and this is the key factor, right? She wants to live, she wants to fight, she wants to maintain her independence. So the second part of this whole success story is her attitude. I could not do this if she was not willing to take the pills, eat the bad diet, you know, the horrible tasting diet, the green smoothies that look like vomit, you know, get in the hyperbaric multiple times a week, still do the red light therapy, do the PEMF, do the hydrogen inhalation, do the pills, do the thing, do the doing every day, sit on the bicycle while I'm working, you know. That's the toughness that it requires to get this miracle to happen. And that's where most people do not have that mindset. So if there's one thing I can impart to people, if you really want something and you're willing to go through hell and high water to get there, you will make it, you know. Yeah. And if you don't, you die trying. And that is a better way to go out. You know, like, if you're gonna, like, that's the ultra marathon mindset. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl, but just keep moving forward somehow. And then you will get there. And then you will get to that finish line, and you'll be like, woohoo, I did it. How the hell did I do it? And I look back over my career of ultra marathoning, and I'm like, hell no, I never want to go through that again. But I did go through it. I learned the lessons, and I can take that for my business life, for my personal life, for helping other people. And it's just like, humans have so much more ability than what we give ourselves credit for. And what I hate the most, when I go into hospital settings or doctor settings, and they're just like, well, you know, Isabel, you know, you just have to accept it. Oh, you know, F off. We're not accepting anything. We're going to fight, you know, and I hate that give up attitude. And I suppose it's because I'm a warrior sort of mentality and almost military in my approach, but that's what it takes, because life is hard. You choose your hard. You either choose it'll be hard because you were lazy and you didn't fight and you ate the wrong food and you drank too much and you took the drugs, and you will have a hard ending. Or you pick the other way where it's hard. You do the training, you do the diet, you do the hard yards, you do the therapies, you keep at it, and it's a different type of hard, but it will get you a lot further. We're all going to die one day.
Yeah.
But my dream is for people to be able to live a health span, like their health span, to extend their health span until they come in from the garden one day, picking weeds, and they sit down and they go to sleep, and that's it. That's the way to go out, right? Not this decline that we see for 30 years or 20 years from the age of 50. And that means, you have to keep the body maintained. The body needs movement. The body needs hydration. It needs nutrients. It needs minerals. It needs all of these things. So work out what it is that you're missing, because if something's going wrong, it might be too much stress. That's definitely the one that attacks me the most, is the stress levels. But if you can, try to manage all of these aspects of what it takes to be a healthy human being, you can do amazing things. I'm 57 years old, I can still do the splits and handstands and, pull-ups and all of that sort of stuff. I can't run 100 Ks right now because I'm not trained for that, but I could if I wanted, It's all about where you're at and, starting where you are, and just take the first step and keep taking those little steps, just crawl forward.
This has been such an amazing story. I love what you said, too, about the different types of hard. It reminds me of this motivational speaker, Jim Rohn. He's since passed, but he said, you can pick two pains in life, the pain of regret or the pain of discipline. But the difference is regret weighs tons and discipline weighs ounces. So they both still weigh something. But, especially probably as you get farther and farther in life, there is a certain time where you can only change so much. Like, I can't fix the things I did at 20 at 50 years old, right? So that regret, that does weigh tons. That's why, versus these little disciplines every single day, it's annoying. Might not be what you want to do in the moment, but you have more life satisfaction and you can feel good about yourself. I think it also builds confidence too when you do that. So, and by the way, I know that you're saying that some people, because they're seeing the way that you make your mom exercise, that you're a bad daughter. I'm thinking the exact opposite. I'm like, I hope, even if your mom doesn't fully remember the bad incidents, which I'm kind of glad she doesn't, right? That would be fun to remember.
I've got the trauma, she hasn't.
I hope she understands how much you've put. I know you're not doing it for that reason, but I hope she understands how much you've put in, because this whole story is not possible without what you have added in. I get that she has to do the things herself, and that's amazing, but she needed you to save her when she was at her lowest. You probably bringing in your paramedic friend is the only reason she didn't die that day.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? That paramedic coming in and saying, hey, no, this is an aneurysm. You need to do something here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like if that never happened.
100%. Like it really is, you have to advocate hard in the medical system. You can't just sit back and go, well, they know everything. They went to medical school. They're the gods and white. They are not. And they are resource constrained, time constrained, tired, overworked, over-challenged. You've got to think in their shoes. So you've got to try to fight for your loved one, because they're not sitting in your shoes watching your loved one die, right? So you've got to fight like a crazy person in order to be heard, because the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? If you sit back and you're like all nice and polite and all of that, I mean, I'm not saying be rude, but I am saying be assertive. And I am bring in the people to support you when you are in a battle in the medical system, because it is a battle. Understand that it's a battle for resources, that we don't have enough. And so when you've got a loved one that you don't want to die or you don't want to be written off, then you better be there. And you better be watching, and you better be super careful. I mean, I won't even go into the hundreds of other medical little, skirmishes I've had over the years, because it's more than we can fit into this time today. And with my father, unfortunately, too, and we lost that battle. So I know what it is to lose as well. And the way he died was also terrible. And I wasn't able, no matter how much I fought against the system, to get him what he needed in his moment of need. And that's the biggest regret that I have in my life, that I wasn't able to, because I was up against an ethics committee that wouldn't let me do. He had sepsis and after an aneurysm, and they wouldn't let me do intravenous vitamin C when I knew Dr. Paul Marrick's clinical research on 50% drop in mortality rates when you could get the protocol that I was trying to get, and they just would not let me do it. And I fought them for 16 days, legal battles, everything, while my dad's dying. And so, I know what it is to lose up against the system. And make no mistakes, it is a system with massive flaws, and I don't expect that it will be any different in America. What you do have in America is cutting edge. You've got some cutting edge people over there who are just amazing, and I've had the benefit of having people like Reed, like others like Dr. Elizabeth Yurth from the Boulder Longevity Institute and Dr. William Clearfield, and many that have been along the way that have given me some signposts to go after and directions to go. So there's some pretty amazing people in America as far as that goes. So, pretty lucky over there.
Well, hey, I really appreciate you shouting us out because, unfortunately, every time I talk to someone from a foreign country, it seems that there's only negative things. But you know what? The reality is you have people here that really care, that are subject to a system. I think we were one of the first, and I use this word very loosely, it's just because I can't think of something better in the moment. We were kind of some of the first victims of this Western medical model. So, where you have overweight people over there, you have this issues with the medical system that you're having. We've been experiencing this for decades. 70% of our people are overweight or obese. And I don't believe that it's just their fault or laziness. I know you don't believe that either. It's not that simple.
No.
And you talk about the hoops that you have to jump through in Western medicine. So I know that our normal listeners were probably smiling at some of this today because you advocate so much for some of the things that I advocate for. It's like, I literally use that word. You have to fight. It's not fair. Not everyone is equipped to do that. You and I might actually kind of enjoy it to some degree. I secretly do. But that's what you have to do, guys. Like, you have to advocate for yourself because they're seeing 70 patients a day. It's not that they're bad people, but they do not have the capacity to care as much about your mom or your dad as you do. And that's fine. Yeah, I don't think that's inherently bad.
It's humanly impossible, and they are treated as machines and cogs in the wheel, and their whole financial model depends on that. And so they're stuck in a situation as well. These are not bad people, mostly. Right. There's some that are really cold, hard, nasty people that should not be in the system, and I've encountered those as well. But most of the people are just overwhelmed and overworked and are not allowed to step outside the box or they'll get their head shot off. There's an advantage actually to not being a doctor. There's an advantage to being a health coach or an FDNer, and you're not regulated by the same issues that they are, right? And we have this orthodoxy, and it's not just in the medical field, but in other fields that, this is the way it's always been done. And we run the show, these big, medical bodies and things. And they're not, they poo-hoo Ayurvedic medicine or traditional Chinese medicine or acupuncture or all of these other hyperbaric or all of these other things that just poo-hoo it as a whole lot of codswallop, and that is arrogant and wrong. Arrogant and wrong. And that is leading to a lot of people. It's not just about drugs, and it's not about a Band-Aid approach. It's trying to get to the root cause of these things, and that includes functional medicine testing, and it includes genetics and all of these things, trying to piece together, like in a detective would, what's actually going on in this individual. And that takes some time and money and resources and clever clinicians who are passionate about helping. And that, that's why the work that Reed does and FDN does is absolutely amazing. And Reed was on my show last week. So, what a fantastic person, Yeah,
we're very lucky to have him. With the last several minutes here, I want to make sure that we get to shout out your business because you know what? As I'm listening to the whole story, and then I kind of put all of it together once I get to listen and to the stuff that the guest has to say. You made a very serious decision for yourself when you got your genetics back to, hey, I'm going to stop this ultra stuff because this could potentially kill me. But what's funny is even though some of those actions changed, the way that I perceive it, you didn't change at all. You still have that same relentlessness, which I love. The title of your book is perfectly fitting for you. That is the exact word I would use to describe you after speaking for 50 minutes. And you have now applied that to this work. So I think anyone that is relevant to your demographic that you work with would be lucky to have you. So please take some time to share who are like the ideal people that you like to work with. And then, of course, where can they find you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Evan. I appreciate that. So I have a podcast called Pushing the Limits, which I'd love you all to tune into, and a YouTube channel. So you can find me on YouTube, Lisa Tamati, if you look up my name. I also, my website is lisatamati.com, and I do some one-on-one consulting internationally. I'm sort of I'm pulling back a little bit on that at the moment because I'm the founder of Avum Labs, which is my biotech company, which we are working on longevity and supplements, and we've got a flagship product actually that's just hit the States. And it's called Cell Restore in the States. It's called Rejuvenate Pro in New Zealand because of trademark things. We had to have a different name. But that is going after immunosenescence, the aging of the immune system, and gut health, and transfer factors, growth factors, lowering of the inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-1 beta, IL-6, TNF-alpha, NF-kappa B, all of that. Lowering the zonulin levels, so if you've got leaky gut, if you're dealing with autoimmune issues. And the reason we've made this formulation, which I've spent the last 2 years formulating, and it's got over 15 years worth of clinical research behind the ingredients that are involved there, it's a real powerhouse foundational supplement that's really going to hit all of the hallmarks of aging. So instead of going after a whack-a-mole approach of the 12 hallmarks of aging, we went to the baseline, which is your immune system. Because without a good immune system, your immune system affects all of the hallmarks of aging. So if you have a poorly functioning immune system, which as we get older, that's what happens. We have thymus involution, we have changes in the tissue and cell structure, so that we have, problems with the combination of cells that we're making and that are functional. So our thymus gland is not, our T cells aren't working as well, our natural killer cells are not working as well. That's what our formulation goes after. I mean, I could, talk for an hour on Rejuvenate Pro or Cell Restore in the States, but that's a really powerful thing. So that's taking up a lot of my time, and we're working on a whole lot of other formulations now that are going to be complementary in building longevity, building health span, building people's ability to live long, healthier lives without this deterioration. And the reason I did that was because I didn't have the products that I wanted to see in the market for my mum. I couldn't find them. So I went out and started making them. And that's where, we've been going for a couple of years, and we've got a lot more formulations that we've got to get to the market and working on at the moment. But we do our work properly. Like, we do our clinical research. Everything is clinically validated. Everything has clinically effective doses in it. So we don't just throw anything together and put it out on the market and make lots of money. This is a passion-driven mission company, Avum Labs. So can find us at avumlabs.co.nz. And if you're looking for it in the States, ohphealth.com has our product, ohphealth.com. And if you're in anywhere else in the world, just come to my website, either lisatamati.com or avumlabs.co.nz, and you'll find it there. That's basically it. I love educating. I love advocating for health and wealth self-sovereignty, that people sort of understand that, both from the health and the freedom side and wealth side, that you need to take control of your life 100%. Don't outsource your life to anybody or any, one thing. You have to be the CEO of your health, your family's health, make good decisions, and never believe it when they tell you it's all over. Because they might. And the longevity stuff that's coming down the pipeline to get the people, if you can hold yourself together for another 10 years, then we're going to
Oh my gosh, now we sound identical. I keep saying the same thing. I'm like, you guys don't be fearful and be neurotic about it, but be careful for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't even think we can scratch the surface of what's about. I mean, just the data alone. I'm wearing an Oura ring right now. Some people wear a CGM. These are not just sleep things and glucose things, guys. These are tools that are going to be used in the broader scheme of things. And we're going to know what happens when we can test your TSH live, your blood glucose live with the CGMs as well, all these different biomarkers.
Right.
I can't comprehend it yet. I can't comprehend it, but I'm excited to see it.
Getting once a year a blood test is not going to cut it, right? We need to know in real time, on the daily, where your blood markers are at, because then we can track it and we can tweak it and we can change it in the moment so that we can be on point. It's going to get there. And then you've got the cellular rejuvenation stuff, the that they were working on. And AI is enabling them. Like I interviewed Dr. David Furman from the Buck Institute and Stanford University's 1000 Immunomes project that we base a lot of our research from AIM Labs on their work. And he said, I can do in my lunch break using AI what used to take me a year, in my lunch break. Because the AI can crunch the data, it can run simulations, it can test 100 different supplements against a thing, whatever they're testing, in minutes, as compared to, it used to be that it would be a PhD to work out the structure of one protein. Now AI can do it in minutes. It can read MRIs, it can, diagnose better than a radiologist. Like the stuff that's coming. And what worries me even is that the regulators might stuff it up for us, because they, things like peptides and hyperbaric oxygen, they've already stuffed those up. Like they've already hindered the process and progress of those getting to the people. And I hope that the regulators don't stop AI from helping humanity live healthier, longer lives, because we've got an avalanche of older people coming. So those older people better be healthier than what they are today, because they need to be working for longer in order to be contributing to society. Otherwise, society might collapse under the load of the older people that are, disabled and dysfunctional. You know what I mean?
For sure. We do have to run. I know that you got to get coffee with Mom, but I have 2 questions that came up in the chat, and they're easy ones. So just wanted to throw them out there to you really quick. So someone said, "Dear Lisa, could you please repeat the author of the book you mentioned about cancer? I think it was How to Starve Cancer."
Yeah. So How to Starve Cancer by Jane McClelland. And actually I've written an audio book as well about cancer, which is an interview series with 21 of the world's top metabolic approach to cancer people in this one audio series. So if people want to find out about that, that's called What Your Oncologist Isn't Telling You. That's my book. So please reach out to me, just go to my website and fill out the contact form. I can send you info on that. But yes, Jane McClelland's book is also a very powerful, good book, How to Starve Cancer. It does get a bit technical, but you will find a lot of benefit in that book. And there are many others, Thomas Seyfried, Dr. Nasha Winters, to name a few, Charles Meakin, the Care Oncology team there. Reach out to me would be the short answer there.
All right. And then one last question, and I can't blame her here, because of course, if you hear Lisa talk, you're like, how can I get connected with her? So Sarah asked, is your lab hiring by any chance?
Hi, Sarah. Why not? Hey, look, maybe in the future we will be. So reach out to me. We are looking for different workers to help us with growing the company. So reach out to me with your bio. Love it. It's awesome.
I love the people that have the boldness. Yeah, might as well ask. No,
absolutely.
This was fantastic. I have so many other podcast hosts that I want to recommend you to. And guys, if you enjoyed this today, please just drop a huge thank you. I don't say anything just to be nice. I'm not that person. I wish I was. I'm actually not. I'm more like Reed than not. And so he's a little blunt, as you can tell. But really, this is easily within the top 5 coolest stories of healing I have ever interviewed in 450 episodes in 5 years of doing this show. So thank you for bringing this to our audience today.
Thank you very much, Evan. It's a real pleasure. I love the work that you guys are doing. I think you're epic, and I hope that we stay connected, because we have to band together all around the world, create these networks,